If you've ever been camping, been on a hike, or really spent any amount of time in nature, you probably know that the wild can be both a beautiful place and also a terrifying one. Yes, there's breathtaking wonders and infinite intrigue to be found in the wild, but it can also be horrifying. Animals murder each other every day, just for lunch. And because the wild can be both beautiful and terrifying, it makes us ask questions like, is it a good thing or a bad thing? Should I get closer to it, or should I keep a safe distance? And honestly, this is kind of how we feel about God at times. Is God safe or is he dangerous? Is he good or bad? Is he trustworthy? Because on one hand, we've heard stories of his goodness and his love, but on the other hand, we've seen some pretty terrible things happen in life. People you love passing away, parents getting a divorce, people getting hurt by people you thought were your friends. And because of this, it's easy to be unsure of who God is and what he really feels towards us. Since we can't observe God with our five senses, our seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching, we try to find other ways to figure out who he is. And more often than not, we use our experiences and our circumstances to help us try to define who God is. So if things are going great, we feel like God is good, God is awesome, he loves us. And if things are going horribly in life, we feel like God is mad at us or disappointed in us, and that's simply not true. Our circumstances don't define our standing with God. Or another way to put it is, our affliction is not a reflection of God's affection. There's a great example of this in Genesis. Abraham gets a bizarre task from God that really rocked his world. Genesis 22, 1-2 says, "Sometime later, God tested Abraham. He said to him, 'Abraham, here I am,' he replied. Then God said, 'Take your son, your only son, whom you love, Isaac, and go to the region of Moriah. Sacrifice him there as a burnt offering on a mountain I will show you.'" God literally tells Abraham to sacrifice his son. This is a huge deal because they were praying for this son for a long, long time. And God finally blesses them with a child, this son, and now he's just going to take him away like this? It doesn't seem very fair. Now, keep in mind that actually human sacrifices were pretty common back then by pagan religions with false gods. People thought that human sacrifices were a real way to please their fake God. But even in the middle of this tough predicament, Abraham is still faithful and begins to do what God told him to do, kill his son. So they go up this mountain together and they prepare this place for Abraham to kill his only son. And right before he does it, an angel of the Lord stops him right before he goes through with it. Listen to how this is resolved. The angel is talking to him in Genesis 22, verses 12 and 13. He says, "Do not lay a hand on the boy," he said. "Do not do anything to him. Now I know that you fear God because you have not withheld from me your son, your only son." Abraham looked up, and there in a thicket he saw a ram caught by his horns. He went over and took the ram and sacrificed it as a burnt offering instead of his son. A lot of things happened in this moment in history. God revealed to Abraham that he was unlike any other god that pagans worshiped because they allowed human sacrifices, but God is 100% not for it. Actually, the only time in history that God was for a human sacrifice is when he gave his son to be a sacrifice on our behalf. Also in this moment, Abraham learned that God is a God who provides. Sure, this thing was a challenge and a difficult time for Abraham, but he still trusted God in the middle of it, and his faith grew immensely when he got to the other side. And here's the thing too, God showed Abraham in a very clear way that he's for him, he's with him, he'll provide for him, he will guide him and make a way for him. All in all, this story really gives a very clear picture of who God really is and what his sentiment is towards people. And in the same way, God shows us the exact same thing through the death of his son Jesus on the cross. Because look, there are actually some bizarre similarities between Abraham sacrificing Isaac and God allowing Jesus to be a sacrifice on the cross for you and me. In Genesis, God saved the sacrifice of the son. In the Gospels, God sacrificed the son in order to save. God provided a ram as a sacrifice to die instead of Isaac. And God also provided his son as a sacrifice to die instead of you and me. And because of this unchanging, undying fact, we know that we can trust God. We can know that he's for us no matter what crazy things are happening in life. The death of a grandparent, your parents' divorce, sickness, bullying, loneliness, depression. We can know that God is with us through it all and he's trustworthy, even if our circumstances tell us otherwise. The bottom line of today is let God shape the way you see him. When we start to allow God to shape our view of him, things become a whole lot clearer. When we yield to God and give him permission to show us his heart and intentions for us, fear of the wild seems to evaporate. And as you head to life groups, I want you to know there is no limit to the things God can do through you when you start to trust him more than your circumstances.